Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome. Welcome to a wonderful Monday night. Thank you so very much for taking time out of your busy schedule to join us. I mean, there's no Olympics on. Monday Night Football isn't started yet. Baseball is not really till it's good. I mean, October. Oh, by that point, my team's gone. Um, so yeah, we're glad you're joining us.
I mean,
So
there's a lot
definitely
of
appreciate.
sports. You could continue on through the sports and get a few more in there if you wanted to. It's probably
There are, but those aren't even meeting. Like I was at least going with the ones that are having something happening right now.
hockey's probably like thinking about punching somebody or or off practicing shadow boxing. There's so much, so much.
There is. There is.
So Cubbie's busy tonight. He's got the Iowa State Fair he's working right now. I believe I think that's where he's at.
Yeah.
He's a busy guy. So tonight, Dan and I are holding down the fort. And Dan, what I wanted to kind of talk about tonight was the title was about making in essence, a wedding, the ultimate wedding soundtrack. And I think the discussion around wedding, what you play at weddings, especially for younger DJs, that they go and we've even talked about this in other shows where we've gone and say, take that, the DJ event planner, the most popular 200 songs, and basically start from there and building that. And I wanted to kind of go through a little bit and get some thoughts on how one puts together today's what you're going to be playing at a wedding compared to we're going to kind of preface this. I'm going to go back 30 some years, 35 years, Dan. This is actually back when cassette tapes were starting to were 35, maybe 35 years. At that particular time, a lot of the multi-system companies in the central part of Minnesota, because that's where I was from and that's where I paid a lot of attention, would go and put songs into 3 to 5 song sets on cassette tapes, and the DJs would go and they would have all these tapes with these little short sets. And you basically, if you were going to be hearing, as an example, Brown Eyed Girl, you were hearing the 2 songs ahead of it and 1 song after it, type of thing. That there wasn't a lot of change up of what you were doing at that time, partially because these multis were doing cassettes. That's where everything was. It was easy for duplicating the music libraries, what have you. So we've gone from a time where in essence, the playlist was set before they even left the office because they did not carry anything like what we can carry today. Back then, when we first started, we had some records, we had some cassettes, and then we had a few CDs because they were so expensive. And then as time went on, by 1990, I'm trying to think, 1991 or 92, we probably had 150 CDs, and we thought we had like all the music there was. But times have changed. So let's kind of dig into it. First off, when it comes to a wedding, you're going to be doing a wedding this weekend, as an example. How much of that, as we sit here today, how much of that playlist of songs you're going to play Saturday night, would you feel that you could say, okay, I can say 80% of the playlist is already figured out in some way? Maybe not how they're played, when they're played, but I pretty much know 80% of the songs that will be played.
That might be a little high for me personally, but I'd be definitely. I think it'd be fair to say definitely a majority of what I'm going to play that night, not in the order, but the selection would be, pretty standard. That as far as figuring that out from there.
Give me an example of one of the songs that you'd be like, yeah, that would be on. I'm going to be playing it Saturday. I just know I will.
Sure, yeah,
Yeah,
slow
just
ride a low, like the ones that we know, even though they've been around for 20 years now or just about, we know they're going to get a positive reaction from everything from, Aunt Joe down to, the bridesmaids and groomsmen.
mm-hmm.
Like everybody typically responds in a favorable light. I know for sure they're going to be played.
Those types of songs. I was actually talking to a DJ probably Friday, and he actually was saying that he tries to avoid. He hasn't played Usher's in a long time, and we talked about Flow Rida with Low, and he said he hadn't played that for 3 years, and he intentionally doesn't play it because he feels that falling into that rut of always playing the same songs everyone hears at weddings is a crutch in essence, and that he can be more creative. And it kind of brought me to, like today I was listening to another one of Mike Walter, one of his mix mixcloud.com/DJ Mike Walter. He doesn't. There's some of the old reliables like you just mentioned are in there sometimes, but sometimes you don't hear those songs in his sets. Are we doing a disservice by because I'm the same way as you are, Dan, that I know I'm going to be playing Flow Rider probably at some point in time during the night with virtually every wedding. Is that a bad thing that we're doing that?
I think if we go into the philosophy of like we have to play that, yeah, I think it's a disservice. I think if we go into it just saying, you know what, I'm definitely going to play that. There is no ifs, ands, or buts because you know what, I don't care if they're responding in that style or not. They're going to get that. And I think that does do the disservice. With that being said, to go into it, with the kind of the mindset of yes, I'm going to play this because I know the reactions that I'm going to get is kind of a different way of putting the same spin on it, I guess we'll say.
Okay.
When I meet when not when I meet, but when I'm going into the night and I start kind of piecing together where those songs fall, kind of depends upon how people are responding. And so if I have I will say this, like if I go into kind of an older set, in a 90s and 80s or earlier, and they're responding well, then that might be a night that I don't ever play either of those two
Mm-hmm.
because they're feeding more into that. I'm not going to get that 2000s classics that are hitting well. Um, but in the same respect, if I start playing a lot of the pop/hip hop that mainstream hip hop, if we will, that's responding favorably, then yeah, like it makes sense for me to play that. And I would say, it's kind of funny that I get that he doesn't play it, and that's fine. But I've also been in some situations where not playing those two, where I'm like, all right, I'm not gonna play those songs tonight, and then I get requests for them.
Mm-hmm.
Like they'll come up. Aren't you going to play this? Well, you know what? I was actually going to avoid it tonight, but you know what? Since you asked, why not? Um, so I think that's the case. The other thing that I would go with Mike Walter, and I think this is also kind of one of those maybe benefits, disadvantages. I don't know how you might want to word it for somebody who plays as often as he does, that sometimes kind of constantly hearing it, he's going to go avoid it just because he's constantly hearing it.
Mm-hmm.
So not one of those where he feels like he has to, not one of those where he's not going to get a good response, but kind of like, you know what, I'm so burnt out on it. I'm going to avoid it tonight unless I have to,
Sure.
unless I have to play it. And likewise, kind of the advantage is I feel like he has a little bit more leeway to try some other songs and keep track of them in a better light because if he's playing two nights back to back, if it hit one night, well now maybe I can bump Flow Rider low to be able to play this.
Mm-hmm.
So he has a kind of the way to maybe play a little bit where I'm doing one a week. If it doesn't hit, now it's the next week before I'm thinking about trying something again.
Sure. Okay, I got a few things I want to dig into. You mentioned responding favorably. Is kind of a gauge that you use. Kind of describe what you're utilizing, what you're looking for, or however, so you can say that yes, this song they responded favorably to this song. What's your keys for that, please?
Well, when you have a group of people that are on the dance floor and they're dancing, right? And then you play something that hits an emotion with them, is one that they enjoy. You see a different energy coming out of the dance. They're not suddenly going crazy with their dance, but you can tell they're feeling the song a little bit more. They're feeling the beat a little bit more. Maybe they're singing along to it. Or you have people that were kind of on the outskirts going, hey, let's get on the floor, or they grab somebody and pull somebody onto the floor with them. So it opens up um, more of that body language response that we're watching and can see them kind of just stand a little taller,
Mhm.
sing a little bit more, dance a little bit, a little bit more into it, feeling it a little bit more.
You mentioned, of course, pulling people out on the dance floor, but you are also gauging non-dancers when you're watching the audience.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I mean, because especially earlier on in the evening, cocktail hour, towards the end of dinner, where I'm trying to kind of gauge what might work a little bit later. I'm not doing necessarily dancing tracks during that time, so there's nobody going to suddenly go onto the dance floor during those moments. But are they starting to sing along? Are they starting to have a smile on their face? Are they starting to head bob? Are they, if they're at dinner table, is the, are the fingers tapping like on the tabletop? Like, are they responding in non-danceable ways that says this is a song for me?
Hmm.
And so that kind of helps gauge a little bit as well, seeing where I might go, especially if a couple gives me that flexibility to say, you know what, cocktails, dinner, we don't really have a style that we're going for. We trust you to try some things. It opens the door for me to experiment, so I know what might work later.
Sure, for sure. Um, you mentioned, of course, having guests come up and with the if we haven't played a specific song that's typical, and aren't you going to play? Uh, you mentioned we've been talking flow ride and yeah as an example, but there's other songs I'm sure you've gotten that for again newer DJs who are like, yeah, I don't want to be playing all these standard classics. What are some of those standard classics from your experience that people are like, yeah, aren't you going to play it tonight? Type of thing.
Whitney Houston, I Want to Dance with Somebody. Killers, Mr. Brightside. For the longest time, I thought it was starting to go by the wayside. I was starting to avoid it, kind of like
Mm-hmm.
what the other DJ was. I'm like starting to kind of go, you know what? If I don't have to play this, maybe I'll hold off and not play it. That sometimes I'm still getting requests for that. So, I can go through nights where I don't play it, but I can also see where like there's been nights where I'm not, and also it's being requested. Um, Occasionally, this a couple of these don't happen quite as often as the ones I mentioned. But like a Little John, Get Low, what are some other ones that kind of jump into that
Cupid
into that mix?
shuffles.
Sometimes like Akesha, Timber, things like
Yeah,
that.
Cupid shuffles one that has been recently Wobble.
Yeah.
And I've had people they're like, you're gonna play that, aren't you? No, I really hadn't planned to, but hey, um, there was another fishing in the dark. We've talked about this in past shows that this is kind of a big thing in the Midwest. So fishing in the dark is one you're gonna play, and then twice I think I've had the YMCA. You're gonna play YMCA tonight, aren't you? Again, it's different places, different times, and I think one of the variables that dictate this part of it is the amount of weddings that these people have been to. If they've only
Mhm.
go, and we've talked about this in different shows, where if they only go to one or two weddings a year, they get excited about the YMCA because it's the only place they're going to hear it. If they're going to be going to 15 weddings by the end of the year, they're like, yeah, no, we don't want to hear any of those things. Let's play that eclectic playlist that what it was a day was mentioning up above, doing a non typical wedding songs for 2.5 hours.
Yeah.
I think it really
Some
just
old
kind of
school
depends.
stuff, Hannah
Yeah,
Montana, emo stuff. Yeah.
yeah. Just it depends on where the people are at and such with that. The last point
I,
that you had thrown out, I wanted to kind of dig into a little bit was you mentioned keeping track of songs. Specifically in Mike Walter's situation where he's doing multiple nights and he can kind of look at a song and say, oh yeah, this one worked tonight, and figure out where it should fit into his play. Um, it's been a long time since I've done that. Have you ever really done anything to kind of keep track of how the songs as you're playing them? I guess.
not anything like formally where, I think we've talked in some previous shows that you used to have a formal
Yeah.
like rating system when you would bring some songs out that would be the case. And I would say nothing along those lines. Just and a lot of times what happens for me is if I'm going to kind of experiment, it's because a couple decide to throw something on a play if possible or even a must play list. And I'm like, all right, you know what? They asked for it. So let's go there. And I do keep that kind of in the back of my head, right? If they ask for it, this might be a song from their friends group that has some story that I don't understand, that has some sort of meaning there, or is some sort of relevance that would not work with anybody else. But if I play that and I kind of see, and this is where I really kind of, especially in those situations, kind of try and chalk it up to, is the fringe groups,
Mm-hmm.
right? The ones on the outsides of the dance floor, how are they responding to this, right? Because if it is that immediate friend group and it's only that immediate friend group, then this could very much have that story. But if it's the fringe group that's kind of going in a while, or you know what, I'm kind of vibing this, even though I might not know what it is. Um, I do kind of tuck that back in my brain. I might drop that into a different folder on virtual so that I can kind of keep track of it. Or or again, if it's been on a play if possible or must play, when I go to get that ready for the next wedding, I won't delete that entire folder. I'll take those key ones that I really liked and put them into a spot to go. Let's come back to that again.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned you were just talking about fringe, the fringe group. You know, you've got your floor, you've got that fringe group, and then you got the people in the back who are basically there for fellowship type of thing. See, I use the three F's in this. I have the unit. Is there a time when you, from your experience when you've been playing, is that fringe group is actually keeping them engaged or feeling that they're engaged has been more important to you than the actual number of people on the dance floor?
Not not necessarily.
Okay.
Um, I would say there's some kind of ebb and flow there, right? If they stay on the fringe, no. But if they're on the fringe, they come onto the floor for a little bit, then they go back to the fringe, then yeah. Then it's that ebb and flow. Now it's like, okay, I've got a group that I can respond to favorably. I can pull them in every so often. Maybe I could do two songs back to back that are absolute favorites and they're going to only dance to one.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. But the fact that I can pull them for a little bit, absolutely. But and that's my philosophy, right? I know some people are just like, it's all about them having a good time. If they're dancers, great. If they're not, then great. Well, one of the questions I often ask my couples is, what, what's your expectations for the night? What do you want people to say about your wedding?
Sure.
And for some of them, it's we had a great dance floor all night long.
Mm-hmm.
So those fringe groups, I'm sorry, if I can't pull you to the floor, I want you to have a good time, but you're not as important to me as the couple's view of that dance floor.
Mm-hmm. And what
So I'll
they're
try and bring,
yeah, and what she or he or with a couple, what they're focusing or what they're defining as a win.
yeah. What about you? I mean, like when you're looking at your groups, do you focus on the fringe as much? Do you kind of here and there?
I will focus actually on the fringe and the crowd more than I do the dance floor, because I figure
Okay.
that once they're on a dance floor, they've made the commitment to be involved and be out there. And yes, if they're you paying attention and read if they're not singing along, if they're just dancing to the beat because they're it looks like they're in a bad Saturday Night Live skit, that's probably not working. And you need to be looking and moving on to a different thing or doing a short edit and getting something else. But once you've kind of got that core there, and now it's time to watch the rest of the room. Is there a type of music that I can have this and I can have these people singing along and the people in back bebopping along? If I can do that, then I'm starting to develop a more of a group experience where people are all, gosh, we just really enjoyed the 80s, all the 80s stuff because we're all 80s people, whatever. But I feel like I spend more time watching that fringe specifically, or those, the first two tables, if there's tables around the dance floor, of what's going on with that. With that being said, there's times where those tables are having all the aunts and uncles and grandparents, and these are folks who probably never dance and never get up. And they probably are only there because it's easier for them to see what's going on the dance floor. And it's tough to read with that because you're looking at them. It's like, okay, they're all 70. That would have put them, in the experiencing of the Beatles and that type of a time frame. And really my yacht rock stuff I was doing at the beginning of the night probably fit them really, really well. And now I'm not going back to the 70s and really that time frame, because there is stuff that would work, but it's not going to be things that are known to the younger crowd as well. So it's that fringe group sometimes, or the fringe area, can give you a false read, where that group just loved that I played Cecilia, but my dance floor people had no idea what Cecilia was. And that has happened like 3 times this summer. It's like, oh, Brown Eyed Girl and Cecilia used to be 2 kind of go-tos for the longest time, and this summer they've been just kind of like flops. We talked about the songs and knowing a percentage of the songs to go into the advance, or that we're going to play in advance. Watching specifically Nick Spinelli when he's doing some of his different things, I would, and again, I haven't talked to Nick, and I'm just going to go out on a limb here and say a little bit. I think Nick in many cases has maybe one of the songs in a little set that a couple maybe said, hey, I want you to play this song. And I think that Nick has kind of prepared, what's going to lead into it and what he's leading out of it, especially when he's doing like a wordplay or something, that he knows in advance what he's going to do, whether it's going to work with the crowd or not. Most of the time he's got a pretty good feel that he can make it work depending on the timing of when he plays it during the evening. But I think that's an example of a situation where the first song might be one that's requested. The second song might not even be a great, it's a good song, but it may not be a big hit, a dance floor standard. And I think that that's one of the things that has changed over the years, is that as a DJ, I feel like I almost have to be playing more of those big hits, those big dance floor standards that people are wanting to experience, compared to taking as many chances playing songs that, may not work as well, type of thing. And maybe that's just me, but I just don't, as I'm listening to Mike play, or I'm watching some of Nick Spinelli stuff, I almost get uncomfortable at times, like, ooh, I don't know if I would have played that,
Yeah. Yeah, and that's the thing. I think sometimes we get stuck in kind of our own ways with that. Like, as far as, okay, I would typically mix this out of it. I would typically come out of it with this. And so when we hear somebody that kind of goes a different direction, you're like, man, there's so much better ways they could have gone with that. But that's our impression,
Mm-hmm.
right? That's our thought behind it. That doesn't mean that what they did wouldn't, and what they did did, but it does kind of paint a different picture to it for sure.
And I think one of the things that opened my, and we've talked a little bit about when we talked about Mike's playlist in depth, excuse me, is that we can't see what's going on. We can't see his crowd, how they're reacting. Now that I've been this last, I think, 5 weddings that I did, I've got Michael, who's been doing most of the spinning, and I've been letting him pick more and more of the songs, especially as the evenings progressed, just to see where he's at and how he's working through the music side of it. And there are many a times he's playing songs that it's like, oh yeah, I wouldn't have played that, but they worked. The crowd, at that time of the night had enough, bravery juice in them that they were on the dance floor and they were going to sing along and do their things, and they were having a great time. In many cases, those are songs I've never played on my laptop. I know of them, and I have, heard them on, Spotify or whatever, but it's not something I've actually ever played out, or I haven't played it since it was a hot song when I was doing high school dances, but it was like never played at a wedding. And sure enough, just in the right situation, the songs actually worked very well, surprisingly. Like Hotel Room Service. Hello, I've never really played that. Somebody requested it once at a wedding, and I think I did play it, but that's one of them that he uses quite often, and it's surprisingly has gone over really, really well. It's like, interesting. So yeah, the idea that I think that when we were first talking about weddings, and specifically with younger DJs, they're like, can you give me the full list of songs to play for the night? I've had that from a couple of younger DJs over the last number of years that I've been working with. And I think that's part of it, just not knowing what are potentially requested songs. But I think that there's got to be a balance, or there's some sort of a balance between having everything planned out and having, the spontaneity to be able to mix in 20 songs that you weren't thinking about, but all of a sudden you're like, hey, that could work. And my thought is that if we do too much of this, where we're adding those 20 songs and that becomes 30 songs, are we missing some of the wedding standards that some of our guests are expecting? And is that a disservice to them? Or is it a disservice that we're playing all these wedding standards that they're playing the, I want to dance to, that kind of a thing, and not doing enough of this? And this is an area I really have been struggling with when it comes to making that soundtrack for the day, is which direction do you go? Obviously you're trying to balance it out, but is one way leaning too hard left or right, is one way going to be doing a disservice to your guests or your client?
I absolutely, I think it is. I think anytime you decide I'm going, this isn't a direction you got from your couple. Anytime you decide I'm going this way, and that's what I'm going to do before you ever step foot in the venue with a guest, I'm going this way with it. It's a total disservice. It's a disservice to the guest, because even if you did, like, I've had this situation last year. I had a situation where a bride and groom, I had done their wedding a couple years before, and then I had uh, like friend groups, and I had two of the friend groups
Mm-hmm.
where they were repeated people, like a lot of repeated people, and I didn't realize quite so much until I was looking through the photographer's pictures and went, "Wait a minute, I think I just saw that over here."
Uh-huh.
Um, Even if you have that situation, to go in and go, "It's the same friend group. I'm just going to go the same direction." They may not be feeling it in the same way. What I would recommend for anybody that is setting up what they're doing for the night is to basically, for lack of better terms, have your GPS ready to go. Right? Like, think about when you put in to you're going on a trip somewhere and you put into the GPS, it goes, here's your three possible routes that you can go. One will take a long time, one will be the short route, and one might be the fastest. Whatever. And you decide to go one of those routes. And then there's an accident somewhere and you get detoured, right? That's what our music selection in the night needs to be. I've got a plan. I've got two plans, three plans of how I'm going to do the night. And depending upon what my guests decide to respond to or start to feel before that bravery juice decides to kick in, helps paint the picture of the route that I'm going to continue to go.
Mm-hmm.
And even if I decide to continue to go that way, if something in my gut, as it was referenced in the chat, yeah, it's a gut feeling, right?
Mm-hmm.
If something in my gut says, you know what, this doesn't seem like it's the best path for me to go, I'm going to pull my GPS back up and I'm going to go, you know what, I'm going to go over here and I'm going to take this road instead. And you might be doing that multiple times throughout the night. Even if they do respond favorably in one direction, you may decide that you need to go in a different thought process to how you're painting that picture that night.
Mm-hmm.
I think anything less than that is too rehearsed, too set up, and falls more into the festival traveling DJ idea,
Mm.
where I have a set list. I walk in and I could do that same set list every night for a year because I'm never in the same place twice.
Mm-hmm.
And as mobile DJs, we're rarely in front of the same crowds frequently,
Right.
but I don't think that's the direction to go. Your guests are going to respond in a different way because they're made up of different people. They're not all festival goers.
Mm-hmm. And as Eric has mentioned a couple of times here, depending upon who's in front of you or watching or reading, who's out there, and it's such a huge, critical thing, I believe, and I think that's a downfall, not a downfall, but I think it's an area in which newer DJs really need to work on, is that you can have that list of 30 potential songs that are the big bangers we've referred to over time, that the whatever, that, okay, so sometime during the night, these songs usually hit and do well for me. and I could play these. These are my kind of go-tos if I need them, type of thing, or can work around and then add more seasoning as I'm going along with the different things, depending upon what I'm seeing in front of me, what's going on here, what's going on around the room. Are all of a sudden do I have a crowd that there was a wedding where they loved I was surprised at how many people loved Def Leppard. We played 6 Def Leppard songs at that wedding, and each one of them they sang along at the top of their lungs. Now, if I wouldn't have stumbled into the first one and found out that, oh my gosh, and that everyone, we just love it. This family, pretty much, it was like a family thing to go to Def Leppard concerts. Would have never guessed it, would have never known it if I didn't stumble upon it. But the flexibility was there in reading the crowd to know that, that song worked. Let's try Photograph and see what happens with Photograph. Oh my gosh, Photograph worked. Let's try a little bit of Rock of Ages. Oh my gosh, Rock of Ages worked. Let's try a little. I know, Dan, this is an old band that you probably don't follow, but, Def Leppard's, an 80s thing.
There's a joke in there, but I'm not going to go there. But no, I think you hit it right. Like having some of those tried and trues. I think what becomes the problem for a lot of DJs is that they either get stuck in always doing the same sets or having a folder of songs that is so small that they're not willing to trust that they can go and
Mm-hmm.
stumble upon something. Or they're not comfortable enough in their mixing to go, man, if that didn't work, I don't know how to get out of this. And that's going to be very uncomfortable 3 to 4 minutes.
Very, very true.
Right. Like you have to be comfortable with your mixing to go, you know what? I played that. I'm not getting a response I need to get. Let's get out of this early.
Mm-hmm.
You maybe let it breathe for a little bit, but if it doesn't, get out of it. And being able to kind of go with that direction, like it was intentional that you wanted to get out of it early. But I think there's also been this big push, and I'll blame the Facebook groups for it. For the longest time, it was, you know, not just mixing, but let's mixing key and let's, harmonic mixing rather,
Mm-hmm.
and short mixing, and all these things that we're seeing from some very talented DJs. A lot of people are like, well, I've got to do that.
Yes.
And it becomes a very difficult, at least to me, it's difficult to harmonic mix until you really learn how to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's not just, I'm going to pick this song, I'm going to pick that song, I'm going to pick this song, but it's like, I'm going to pick this song. I was going to pick that song, but if I'm going to harmonic mix, I can't pick that song.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to have to pick this one. And that becomes a lot more difficult for a lot of DJs to try and now not just go, will the song hit or not, but will the song mix? And I think that's why they also get stuck to these, either pre-made playlists that they got from wherever, or a playlist that they create and then get stuck with.
Yeah, we created it at the beginning of the wedding season, and it worked really well for those first 2 weddings. And now we're going to ride that pony all the way through the wedding season. And I think that can be a huge problem because, getting back to, as you've said, as Eric has pointed out here in the chat, you got to be responding to those people in front of you. You've got to see who's there and what's working at this moment with them. But that doesn't mean that you can't have, as an example, you might have a song that you play Ice Ice Baby as an example, and maybe you have a song that you jump out of Ice Ice Baby into another, and it's a mix that you do between those 2 songs, and it works really, really well. I think that if you have something like that, you can definitely utilize it, and it might be something that you're doing for the whole season because it just has worked, and it's really a cool little segue. I don't think those are a bad thing. I think in many cases, if you practice it and it's really good, it's a good thing. It's just, I think, getting to the point of, like, as you mentioned, the festival DJ, where they have got from the beginning, I've got a 45-minute set, and it's the same 45-minute set week in and week out. Yes, they haven't seen you last week. They didn't see you a month ago. Well, in this case, we've been seen by the multiple members of the same audience multiple times because of family and such. But most of the time you don't have that, but it still gets to be that situation is that no 2 crowds are exactly alike. So you can't just bottle it up and pour it out again next weekend.
I would encourage you though, if you've got let's say you have a set that decides to work with that, and rather than deciding to ride that for the entire season, and I know you were just using that as an example, I would look to see is, okay, this has been great. I used this for a while, but is there something else that I could maybe bounce out and practice that at home, right?
Mhm.
Practice it at home. You don't know the crowd response, so that's obviously the piece that's going to be missing from it. But can you create something that's going to have that same type of feel so that you can go that other direction? There's a mix that I was doing, and I was doing it often. I have two short edits of old time rock and roll and Shook Me All Night Long,
Mhm.
and the way they overlap is beautiful. It's the beat drops out on the one and the beat's hitting on the other, and it just sounds perfect. So when the vocals drop out, the vocals pick up, and it just seems like I seamlessly had that song together the whole time. I was playing and I was doing that mix often. And it got to the point where I was just like, I would grab the one and I'd go to grab the other one, and I was just like, I gotta break my habit here. And some of it was my own stupidity of like, I'm recording this mix. I don't want to upload the same set that I've done, you know, 10 times before. I want to do something different.
Mhm.
So I was encouraging myself to try and break that so it wasn't always the same thing.
So now I'm going to go on the other end of that. Is that I was at one of your weddings, or I heard one of your mixes online, and I really liked that ACDC to. I'm sorry, I didn't even catch the other song. I don't remember the other song, but
Oh, Cedar.
I like that set, and I like that mix. It was just so much fun, and it just felt that the energy was there. Okay, now you changed it up, and I'll be like, oh, I know what song's coming next. It's gonna be great. It's gonna be such. You guys got to hear how he mixes these two songs together. And then you played, feelings. Whoa, 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 feelings. Trying to forget. Yeah. I mean, where do we? You get known for a thing, and then all of a sudden we jump away from the thing. It is. I mean, that's got to be part of this equation also.
Maybe, maybe, but I don't. I think, and we talk about this all the time, where DJs analyze it way different than a guest would ever,
What?
right? Like so what I see as um somebody's element that they might have done great. I don't foresee maybe the guest necessarily coming at it from that same aspect unless you did something that went viral on social media, and then
Good
that's
point.
maybe a potentially different story. Um, but because I also don't think that the guests are now, if I did it a ton of times, right, then they're like, okay, you always have these together. That might be different. But it was one of those things where I was critiquing myself and I was forcing myself to be different, not necessarily because potential clients are going to find and listen to the 15 mixes to see if these songs are back to back,
Mm-hmm.
but to just kind of force myself to go in a different direction. Case in point, like so my wife doesn't listen to my Mixcloud. She's had me create a few mixes for her to load onto her phone so that she can run with those
Sure.
instead.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of gotten funny because she's like, in a couple of your mixes, you tend to do the same songs. She's like, so sometimes I'll be listening to a mix and I'll know what's going to come next, and then I forget what mix I'm in, and I think you're going to go a different direction because I've heard it a bunch of times, and you are in a different mix. And so she's like, it's kind of interesting. She picks up on it. She
Yeah.
is definitely not a DJ. She is definitely not somebody that picks up on that kind of like stuff from anybody else because she's routinely heard it. Um, so that's kind of another one of those things where I'm like, okay, let's find another way. Let's find another way. Not to say I can't play those two songs, not to say I can't play those two songs in the same set of songs. But maybe I put them in a different order.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I throw a different song in the middle just to try it up and try and mix it up a little different. And again, for my own stupidity and that kind of piece. Yeah, I don't want to be predictive. You're right.
Yeah. Predictive.
You're
Yeah.
right there.
That's a good word to a good word to throw in there, Eric. Thank you. So I think the big kind of takeaway for those who are like, okay, how do we put together I think that the soundtrack is going to include a few different things. Some of the hits that we know are going to be there. Maybe some requests. Somebody, John Colley, I think, mentioned up above that he does pretty much gives the requests a fairly much a green light, or he trusts the request, unless it's really, really weird. And I get that. That's I think pretty much what many of us do, unless you've got that person who's just playing the I'm gonna ask the bride wants to hear this. This is her favorite song. Really? Wow. She didn't give that to me in her 10 songs that were the ones she said to play. So you've got the big hits. You've got some guest requests to mix in there. You've got the reading on the fly type of things. So different variables. I guess the point is that I don't know if it's even possible to go through and put together an advanced playlist of all the songs that you're going to be playing at today's weddings, like we did 30 some years ago. 30 some years ago, they would tell you that these 20 cassette tapes, this is your night. You're going to have a great time. And this is the music you're going to listen to. And everyone would be like, yeah, okay, good. I don't think we do that anymore.
No, but I think it's also so. Think about the listening habit of somebody then, right? So if you had the radio station, it was predetermined for you. Okay, whatever. Um, if you had an album on cassette, you weren't skipping around songs until you finished a side,
Yeah, that's
right?
true.
And then maybe you did, or maybe maybe you had a tape player that went back the other way, and then you were great. Um, Even when we got to CDs, initially they were beginning to end. And then we got the shuffle, right? So then it kind of opened the door a little bit. And I'm talking about consumers, not DJs.
Yeah, yeah.
But so it was an order type of thing. So and now you give me 10 songs and I can do whatever I want, making a playlist through YouTube, through Spotify, through Apple Music, through all these other places. So you don't have to dictate it. Nobody over here has to dictate it. I get to completely do whatever I want, and there's no lapse between these songs.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's what part of the reason why that flexibility has to come into play. If I was a new DJ coming onto the scene, I would be very overwhelmed by the music situation,
Mm-hmm.
right? That's one of the questions that come up. How do I, like you said, how do I determine what to play?
Yeah.
And I think having your set of go-tos, your go-tos is a good piece, because again, those are kind of expected to be played. Not that you have to play them, but that be prepared because somebody might ask for it.
Yep.
And then listening to other DJs for those songs that are popular, or that would probably, you would go, oh, I wasn't thinking about that, but I can see why that might work.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't thinking about that one. Oh, but you know what? That's a good one to throw in there too. And you start to build a secondary catalog of songs, if you will. And then as you get into it deeper, I think they maybe mentioned he has a folder that's called 2024 requests.
Mm-hmm.
And so as your couples create that piece, he's been dumping all those in, and then the ones that go over horribly or just don't get really much requests, he gets them out of there, so it's not huge. I think that would be a way to kind of develop. And then as you're talking with your couples, right, getting the picture of what type of thing that they're wanting to, what type of picture that they're wanting to paint that night, and looking at what they're responding to. Did they respond to something more from your third folder of deep cuts? By your fourth or fifth folder in that case, but were they responding better to your deep cuts than they were to your tried and trues? Well, then yeah, you might have to dig in that folder a little bit more that night.
Mm-hmm.
I think that becomes the picture. You're not going to be able to walk in and go, these are the 60 songs I'm going to play tonight. It's just, I don't see it working that way, no matter whether you've been doing this for 30 years or whether you've been doing this for a month and a half.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Observance and vibe.
Look at Freddie with those great words tonight.
Yeah. Thank you guys for being with tonight. Great chat in the room there, and some good discussions across there. And there's a few folks on Facebook that are out there, so thank you for being with us tonight. Actually, it's probably a good time to wrap up here. We've got We've got 45, 8:45 here, 9:45 your time. So let's see. Coming this week, I actually, and I don't think I'm going to have it ready for tomorrow morning, but this summer with all the weddings that we've done, we've actually got a couple of pieces of gear. Instead of doing the unboxing and saying, hey, this is all the features of this thing, and then that's the end of it, or hey, look at this light, it's shining in my garage type of thing. We actually we're going to do some review videos on some gear that has been used a dozen times type of thing this summer. So we can actually show you pictures of it in the field and be able to talk about a little bit of starting to get bordering on the longevity of some of the pieces of gear, which at times is kind of important because you buy something and you use it twice and then it starts to act weird. It's nice to know if it will last longer than 2 or 3 shows. So a couple of things that, and then one on how a piece of new gear was used and such with the shows and how we've implemented it. So one of those will be hitting this week, probably later in the week, because it's going to take some time to do some editing. We just shot it today. And I think, Dan, there's one, I think I saw a video of yours that's going to be coming up Wednesday. So that will be ready to go. And of course, tomorrow night, there'll be some stuff streamed, and then there'll be things on Wednesday night streamed, so you guys will be able to follow along. I should put the chill room, DJNTV.com/chill. And you guys can pop out there and in a little bit, and there will be a crew out there, and they'll do some recording and such of tonight's little discussion out there. So excellent. I think that is about it on my end, Dan. So why don't you kind of take it? Yep, I see there's people in the chill room already. So I wanted to just make sure everything was functioning in the chill room.
It's like we're back to school at time, and we're like, oh my
Exactly.
gosh, we got everything like happening. It's like crazy.
Yep. Eric, I'm going to. I think I've got you. Yes, Eric, I just made you a co-host there. So if you guys need the recording capability, you've got it to turn it on. So excellent, wonderful. Take us home, Dan.
Awesome. Well, everybody, I do want to thank you very much for tuning in tonight. Again, whether you're that seasoned vet or whether you're that newbie that's looking for those songs, hopefully this gave you some thoughts to think about as the night went on and help plan for your next event and how the direction is going to go with that. We thank you very much. Hope you have a great, great night, and we will see you next time. Bye, everybody.